By 1513, Henry VIII was long established on the throne of England, and he was now attempting to prove that he was a big player on the European stage by playing war against the French. However, the King of France, Louis XII, turned to an old French ally for assistance, the Scots. Louis made contact with the Scottish King James IV, urging him to attack England, thereby distracting Henry from his campaign in France and forcing him to at least send some of his manpower back across the Channel to defend the north of England. However, there was a complication for James. He was married to Henry's sister, Margaret. But nonetheless, supported by the French, James prepared for the invasion of England by assembling a large army. James still felt obliged to contact Henry and forewarn him of his plans, which would only be altered if Henry ended his own invasion of France, and so the Scottish king sent a herald who found Henry laying siege at Tournai. After being informed by the messenger of James's plans, Henry's response was predictably bullish. He told the messenger, "Tell your master, if he be so hardy to invade my realm, or cause to enter 1 foot of my ground, I shall make him as weary of his part as ever was any man that began any such business." Henry, in short, had made plain to James that should he invade England, he would be Henry's enemy forevermore. James, though, was unmoved by Henry's threats, and instead he marched his large army into northern England, burning and killing as they went, until the Scots came to the hill known as Flodden, where they set up camp. Meanwhile, the English needed to respond. In the absence of the king himself, Catherine of Aragon, acting as regent on behalf of her husband, helped assemble an army which formed in the north of England, providing them with weapons and armour. The army would be led by Thomas Howard, Earl of Surrey, who marched first to Newcastle and then on to Alnwick, which had, in ancient times, been the site of battles between the English and Scots, leading to the death of one Scottish king, Malcolm III, in 1093, and the capture of another, William the Lion, in 1174. At Alnwick, Howard was joined by other leading nobles, including two of his sons, Edmund and Thomas. The English army swelled to a size similar to that of the Scots, said to number around 30,000 men. The English and Scots would meet at the Battle of Flodden Field on the 9th of September 1513. In the early stages of the battle, Edmund Howard marched forward on the English right with around 3,000 men, but he was pushed back by the Scots, with Edmund's men suffering heavy losses. Believing that his army now had the advantage, the Scottish king dismounted from his horse and, seizing his sword, attempted to lead by example and threw himself into the very heart of the battle. But this courage would ultimately prove foolhardy when the Scots and James himself found themselves surrounded, with the king falling in the battle, with his body found afterwards, said by one chronicler to have been wounded in 2 places and showing great dignity, even though the life was gone out of it. Although this is a rather upbeat version of what actually happened, James suffered brutal injuries, so brutal that identifying him proved difficult. The body of James IV was then taken the long journey south to London, where it lay unburied in a monastery at Sheen, as James had been excommunicated. Although Henry wanted James laid to rest at St. Paul's Cathedral, the burial never came to pass, and, ironically enough, his body would be lost during the Reformation a couple of decades later. Following the aftermath of Flodden, James's bloody coat was sent by Catherine as a token of victory to Henry in France. The Battle of Flodden was a bloody affair, with both sides fighting with great determination. The battle was said to have lasted about 3 hours, with around 15,000 men killed in all total. Of those, about a third were from the English army, whilst around 10,000 men from James's ranks. For Henry VIII, these were exciting times. He, as far as he was concerned, was proving himself a worthy successor to the likes of the great medieval kings Edward III and Henry V by waging war in France. His wife, Catherine of Aragon, had stood strong in the face of Scottish hostility, playing a crucial role in the English success at Flodden, proving that he had been right to entrust Catherine with the regency of England whilst he was away. There was no reason, Henry felt, he could not establish himself as one of the great kings of the age. He had a loyal and very capable wife. His enemies had learned that England was a formidable enemy under his kingship, and only one thing remained for Henry to solve: to continue the dynasty that his father had begun. Henry needed a son, and preferably more than one, to succeed him. Catherine had already suffered losses in her attempts to give Henry the son he was so desperate for, but there was still time. Surely God would grant Henry what he desired above all else. Sadly, however, that wouldn't happen during Henry's marriage to Catherine, and eventually an increasingly agitated king would discard the wife who had helped defend England from James IV to continue his desperate search for that crucial heir.